Greetings, Nick with Sweetwater here, and I'm here today with the one, the only Jim Root from Slipknot, and he's here to tell us all about his brand new signature guitar from Fender Guitars. So without further ado, Jim, thanks for taking the time, my friend.
Well, hello. How's it going, Nick?
All well, considering, I have to go everywhere wearing one of these.
I mean,
But it's...
stick it to the man, rebel, resist. I don't know. There's a lot of weirdness going on with this that I have trouble wrapping my brain around, but,
Gotcha. Well, I sincerely hope that the next time we meet in person, the only mask in question is the one you wear on stage, my friend.
And maybe that's why I'm rebelling against it, because it's like, I wear a mask for kind of what I do for a living, so why the should I wear one out in public? You know what I mean?
They'll go, it's just Jim wearing his mask again. Yeah, exactly.
There it is. That's weirdo.
So let's talk about that fine instrument you've got in your hands right there. I mean, look at that. What a perfect screenshot.
Yeah, it's nice. I love it. This is actually one, since we've kind of been in lockdown and we had to cancel our Indonesian tour and all that, I didn't have a production model. I only had prototypes. So I just did an interview a few weeks back with Loudwire. So Fender just sent me an off-the-shelf, it's got a Mexican serial number, like anyone that you'd go into like a Guitar Center or a Sweetwater and buy or whatever. And, I took like a minute, and all I did was I put my strings on it, because the strings Fender usually sends me with or sends out to me are a little bit off on the gauges. So I had a set of my Dunlop strings here. I just threw a new set on, and I broke one, and I don't have any cutters, so I just kind of rolled up the end on that. But yeah, man, I just threw some new strings on it and tuned it. I haven't intonated it yet, but it's kind of awesome, and it's what I've been using to like mess around with demoing and writing, and
right.
I'm tiptoeing into the world of like possibly writing a solo record or a side project, whatever you want to call it. But I also have to write Slipknot stuff. So it's proving to be pretty versatile, because, the stuff that I'm writing outside of whatever I do with Slipknot, I don't want it to sound like Slipknot. I mean, what's the point of that? There's,
right.
Have that outlet, I don't really see any reason to go outside of that. So, I'm getting really cool jazzy clean tones out of it. And I don't know, man, this neck I'm loving this new neck shape so much. It's making me want to it's like the only guitar I want to play in all my setups now.
Yeah, that was one of my questions actually, was what's different about this new neck shape?
Well, so it doesn't have the compound radius.
Right, that was another question, because you've been 12 to 16 before, now you're just 12, straight 12.
Straight 12, which made me nervous. But, a lot of these that I play are straight 12, and some of the Gibsons, and my original Telly is straight 12. But that neck shape is a little bit fatter around the back side of it. This thing is like wafer thin, and I don't know if it's because we've added, the binding and all that
right.
to it. But it just feels so good. And it reminds me of almost like a Jackson neck in a way,
So it's a slim C, effectively.
Yeah, very, very slim. Yeah, and it's still nice and wide, so it's substantial, and I don't feel like I push on the guitar sometimes to do that whole, and it's not like so thin that it's like feels like it's going to snap off when I do that or anything.
Gotcha, cool. And talking about the string gauges, you guys tune pretty darn low. What are your gauges to? Because you're still 25.5 scale, you're not baritone at all. So what are your gauges, my friend?
I've got this one set up to drop B, which is essentially a standard C sharp tuning,
right.
And I'm just thinking it's relatively light, honestly. I have a lot of people that are like, wow, I'm like, if I were Stevie Ray Vaughan, he'd probably be smacking, or if I met him, he'd be smacking me in the mouth right now, because this is so light for such a low tuning. I think we're 2 steps down from A440. So it's an 11, a 15, a 20 plane, a 36 wound, 42 wound, and then a 56.
Wow, that is light for effectively drop B. Wow.
But, with the hardtail guitars, and each guitar is different. Some of my guitars feel slinkier than other guitars. And if I have a guitar that feels extra slinky, I'll bump the gauges up a little bit on them. But it's important for me to keep that plain third string, because I don't really like a wound third string, even when you're tuning that low. That that reminds me of that old kind of classical nylon string setup.
Right. Plus, I guess string bending as well gets weird.
Yeah, and and we still do a little bit of lead playing, and I sit around and I run scales and stuff. Well, I say I sit around and run scales. I don't have any discipline as a guitar player. I think this is the first time I've touched the guitar in probably 2 weeks. But other than, you have different modes when you're playing. So you've got your riding mode, you've got your touring mode, and you've got your woodshedding mode.
Right.
Woodshedding mode, I just kind of crumple up and throw out the window because I don't, who wants to sit around and, what's a big deal? Whatever, who cares? Anybody can sit around and do that. Does it fit into a song? Maybe, I mean,
right.
I want to get weird with it. So when I'm in writing mode, it's really about like I'm trying to write stuff where I'm not just doing power chords all the time. Been there, done that. So I'm trying to do inversions,
cool.
different things like that. But so I don't know where I was going with that. I completely lost my train of thought.
Doesn't matter. It was a good loss of train of thought there.
Yeah, but it's I don't know, man. This guitar just makes me want to play. It's like I gotta when you play for so long and when music is your career, you sort of get a little bit jaded and playing guitar turns from sort of being a passion and a hobby into sometimes like kind of feeling like work.
Right.
But when Fender sent me this for that Loudwire video that I did, I was like, it kind of re-sparked that passion a little bit. So I've been like for about 20 minutes before you called, I picked it up and like tuned it up and was like playing it. And I was like, I sort of got lost in it. And then the Skype call rang in and I was like, oh shit. Yeah, I'm talking to today.
Well, I got to say, at the risk of being obsequious, that's a great endorsement for your own signature guitar, the fact that it makes you want to play. And ultimately, that's what a guitar or any instrument should do. If you don't want to play it, then don't have it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when people, I've got on my social media, I'll have people ask me what a good beginner guitar is. And I can't answer that question because for me, it's whatever guitar makes you want to play. Unless you are so passionate about the instrument, any guitar makes you feel that way.
Right.
But there are certain guitars that, that you just grab and you're like I have one of my prototype Stratocasters that I swapped the necks on. So I have a black one that has a maple fretboard on it.
Cool.
I prefer the darker, the ebony and the rosewood boards, but there's something about that particular guitar, and I don't have it here with me now. It's up at my house. I'm not at home. It just makes me want to play. I play that guitar, and then I'll find myself, if I'm writing, I'll find myself just sitting there, going, just even playing chords on it. It's like, God, this thing just feels so good. It's like, it's
cool.
like, and this is one of those guitars as well, and they're pretty consistent. I've found, even though Fender, they tend to hand sand all the necks, so everyone's a little bit different from neck to neck, at least with the USA Professionals and
right.
all the, all those models. I get some that are a little bit wider and thicker than others, even though they have the same, C shape or whatever. Right. It seems like this production model is, I would say, dead nuts accurate to the one that they sent me to sign off on while we were out on tour that I sent back to them.
Right. Oh, that's impressive. Well, I had the good fortune of going to the Fender factory in Mexico several times, and those guys know what they're doing. It's a serious operation.
Yeah, they're really doing some good stuff down there, and I've been wanting to visit.
They would dig that.
I'd love to go down there, and I've heard, Alex over at Fender was telling me, man, it's a state-of-the-art facility. It's really beautiful. It's, and everybody there is like really hardworking and really into what they do. So it's like a really cool vibe down there.
Yeah, that's the thing that impressed me. Plus the food was good too. I got to be honest with you.
Yeah. Can't beat food, can you? Well,
no, you can't. So I got to ask you about the body shape, like the Telecaster. To my knowledge, only yourself and John 5 were the guys using Teles in metal. Now you've gone to what most people would call like a real alt sort of almost punk shape. What gravitated you towards the Jazzmaster shape, my friend?
Well, I was a little bit hesitant and resistant. Alex sent me a Jazzmaster prototype years ago. At the time, I was in Stone Sour, and we were doing rehearsals to get ready to record Audio Secrecy.
Right.
A couple of months before we started doing that, he sent me He sent me a Jazzmaster. I think it was white, and it had a flame maple fretboard. But it was set up, just like my signatures are set up. Three-way switch, one volume, two EMGs in it.
Right.
I just kind of like sat it in the corner, and I never touched it, never messed with it. Then, because I look at that guitar, and it's kind of like, I start thinking like, oh, Kurt Cobain and
Thurston Moore, whatever. Yeah.
Mastis, Dinosaur Jr., that whole kind of vibe and all that. And I'm into that. I'm into that because to me, some of those alt rock bands are a lot more punk rock than some metal bands.
I would agree.
Which is very kind of an against, mentality, which I have. It's the whole reason I played a Telly, because it was so against what people think of when they think of metal. When I had somebody give me shit about playing a Stratocaster, and I was, sorry, Iron Maiden. Dave Murray, ever heard of him?
Yeah, Richie Blackmore, maybe.
Yeah. Richie Blackmore, yeah, come on. But anyways, I picked this guitar up at a rehearsal, and I put one of my strap locks on it, and it just, like, immediately, because I'd only been sitting down and tinkering with it here and there, and I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, it's cool, but once I put the strap on it, and stood up and played in like a sort of a live setting, I was like, holy shit, this guitar is like so well balanced, and it feels so comfortable. And, me being 6'6", the larger body shape doesn't bother me at all.
No, it doesn't look big on you at all.
If anything, it's a little bit more normal, But it just felt so well balanced and so comfortable. I was like, I feel like it kind of improved my playing, because with the Telly and the Strat, I have a lot of trouble reaching the higher frets. This is like right there.
Right.
Your high fret access, not that I'm running 24 frets or anything, but even getting to 22 is like effortless. It's great.
Cool. That's cool. Sorry, my mouse was intruding on our discussion, so I'll go back to it. Well,
You need an experimenter.
Yeah, exactly. Bring in the exterminator. When you have mouse problems, IT or an exterminator, one of the two. So yeah, because I have friends who play Jazzmasters, and that's one of the things they say. They use standard ones, which to me just look odd with all those switches and the tremolo bridge and all that nonsense. But they say its balance is superb.
Yeah, it's really, it kind of blew my mind, and that was one thing that I didn't really think about too much. It's moving around on stage and kind of running around. It seems like it might be like an afterthought or something that you wouldn't really necessarily put too much effort into thinking about, but it's a thing, it really is a thing. Like, I put these guitars on, and when we tour, it's like, I don't know if anybody's paid attention to the last few tours we've done, but I've kind of been like, only for a couple of songs am I playing a Telly or a Strat, and I've been favoring these Jazzmasters for pretty much, I'd say 95% of the set. Maybe 2 or 3 songs I pull a Strat out, and they're just that comfortable. I feel like I can put them up a little bit higher, like maybe a little bit George Harrison style, and then that, I can reach the frets a lot easier and play more, with better technique and all that stuff. Not that I'm a technique style player, but I tend to go off vibe and emotion, and soul is kind of where I think it's more at. But it helps if you're playing a solo to be able to reach the frets comfortably. So
there's a concept.
Something to be said about that, I guess.
And talking of the setup, like you've always been like one control, just the volume, no tone control, 2 pickups. Is that the Eddie within you, the Van Halen with you, the minimalistic thing, or is it just functionality?
Less is more for me. I'm the opposite of Yngwie. I don't, that whole more is more thing is cool if you're playing, and if you're as melodic and fluent and efficient as he is. But for me, it's a tool. It's a hammer. Like, how much does a carpenter love his hammer? Well, he wants the best hammer for the job, and for me, like I said, again, 99% of the playing that I do is, writing music for Slipknot and playing live Slipknot shows. I never use the tone knob, never, ever use it. So why do I need it? So when I would put EMGs in my older guitars, I would just bypass the tone knob entirely, and then there'd just be a hole in the guitar there that I'd have to plug up, and then you know, I use my selector so much. You know, all my clean tones I pop up to the neck pickup.
Right.
I'd say probably 60-70% of my leads I pop up to the neck pickup for whatever reason.
Right.
I don't do that. I just do it, you know. And maybe that's the Stevie Ray Vaughan part of me coming out. Just always, you know, that Fender kind of Stratocaster always, you know.
Right.
Kind of a false wah pedal or whatever, but I wanted it put somewhere where I don't have to think about it, and the placement of this stuff is right where, you know, if I need to do volume roll-offs, it's so easy to grab, and if I'm flipping pickups, it's just right there. You know?
Now, I was going to ask you about, because the thing I noticed about the blade pickup, the blade switch, is it's actually parallel to the strings. It's not at an angle like a lot of people like it. Is that deliberate?
Yeah, I deliberately wanted that, and that's kind of a selfish thing, because for me, I don't want to, you know, you get muscle memory when you're playing guitar, and you get very comfortable with whatever guitar it is you're playing. And maybe some guys get comfortable with that diagonal. And, you know, I have it, my strats are diagonal and all
Right.
that. For this one, it was like, because of the shape of the guitar and the way the guitar sits, and I tend to like hook my pinky around the bridge sometimes when I'm playing,
Gotcha.
just so I can kind of move the guitar around with my right hand. Which is weird because I'm left-handed anyways. But
Oh, you are? You were lefty?
I'm a lefty, yeah, but I play guitar right-handed, so
Yeah, you're not the only one. There's quite a few great guitar players, the lefties that play righty.
yeah, it's weird. This doesn't feel comfortable. I always thought maybe I'll get a left-handed guitar, see if I can work that out, get all Michelangelo with it, you know, the patio, see if I can. But it's that muscle memory. It's that stream of like sort of like not having to think about where it is. Like I don't have to look to see where my.
No, you slap it.
I just go to where I want it, and boom, it's right there. And when you're thinking in terms of, you know, 30-second notes and, you know, close to 200 BPM songs that we're playing even faster live because we don't play to tracks and we don't play to clicks or any of that stuff.
Right.
Doing a solo, and I got to come out of the solo and get right back to a rhythm. You know, I want to be able to just not even think about it and just be like, and then just like that, I'm back into the rhythm mode.
You can tell just from watching you now that it's pure muscle memory. So yeah, and you should be selfish. It's your guitar.
Well, but you know, I also wanted to make it, you know, functional for the average person. Like just like exactly with the Telly, with every guitar I've worked with Fender on, it's very important for me that even if you could care less about Jim Root or who Slipknot is, or even if you hate Slipknot and you play country or whatever, you would pick up the guitar and be like, okay, this thing plays great and it's versatile and it's functional. I could use this guitar for what it is I do, and I could make that my own.
Right.
You know, I heard I'm having a brain fart right now. So Matt Bellamy from Muse.
Right.
The reason he plays the guitar he plays is because he felt like every time he played someone else's guitar, he wanted to play like whoever that was, the guitar that he picked up, you know, like if he picked up, he'd want to play like Jimi Hendrix, or if he picked up a, you know, a Les Paul or whatever, he'd want to play like, you know, he didn't name anybody specifically, but I related to that. I was like, that makes a lot of sense, you know. I mean, certain guitars will kind of sort of, maybe even if it's subconsciously, push you in a certain direction. So I wanted it to be vague, if that makes sense.
No, that is good. Yeah, makes sense. A lot of sense.
Yeah, so whoever grabs the guitar, they can kind of sort of make it their own. Like if they want to tune it to E and A440, play an E or whatever, or even just a half step drop, like say an Alice in Chains tuning. Or if they want to drop down and get all genty with it and, you know, do a lower tuning without having to go to a 7 or an 8-string guitar, you know, it kind of covers it all.
Now, is that the root is that the root? Is that the root behind, I was going to say, is that the reason you put your signature on the back of the headstock, not the front, so it becomes every man's guitar?
Pretty much, yeah, that was important for me. I didn't want to put out, you know, I'm very proud of what I've done in Slipknot, and Slipknot has provided so much for me. I mean, I'm able to talk to gentlemen like you about things like a signature guitar that I've done with Fender because of Slipknot. Right. So I kind of owe everything to that. But I don't want to put out a guitar that's slathered in 9-point stars and tribal S's and,
right.
you know, and that's not to say that I'm trying to take anything away from the fact that Slipknot gave me that opportunity, to get here and to be able to work with companies like Fender on guitars like this. But I felt like, if it had a big tribal S on it, or, all that Slipknot stuff everywhere on the guitar, that might turn a lot of people off of it who might otherwise not give it a chance. You know what I mean? And, I'm that way. If I see like certain things, like, that they'll sort of like, I'll sort of have a preconceived notion of what I think that is based on a visual or something.
Right.
Maybe prejudice. It's like I've recently just gotten into Ween. Before, I thought Ween was kind of like a jokey prog funny band, but when you really dig deep into their catalog and listen to some of their songs, they're an absolutely amazing band that writes really deep emotional music, even if it is talking about going to a party with his wife or something. But
Right.
songs like The Basin and things like that, they're just very well done pieces of music. And and you can learn something from everybody. I watched Matt Sweeney did an interview with Dean Ween, and I'm like watching Dean Ween, and I'm watching the way he plays, and and you can tell just by watching him just noodle around that there's a muscle memory and an innate knowledge, like maybe even a sort of like something that was implanted into his brain in the womb. Like, you're just going to be good at this because it's going to be like second nature to you or something. You're not going to have to work at it.
Gotcha.
And that's another thing I wanted to do in designing guitar, to make it sort of feel like you don't have to work at it.
What a concept.
But I know a lot of people, here I am talking about other interviews again. I've seen other people talk about guitars where they want to fight the guitar a little bit. It helps them play
Right.
outside of the normal box that they would normally play in, and and that helps them be a little bit more creative. And I understand that philosophy as well. That's why, if I'm stumped on the guitar, I'll throw it down and I'll pick up something that I have no idea what I'm doing with, like a Nova synthesizer or a bass guitar. And, yeah, sure, a bass guitar is essentially a guitar and it's a stringed instrument, frets, blah, 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 blah. But, you have to approach that completely differently from the guitar. And that can be a good tool as well. So, if you want to make this thing play like shit, you can. You can go ahead and, put a lot of relief in the truss rod and bring the saddles way up and get that jazz. I know a lot of jazz guys like real high action, but, and that helps them do what they do. But that's kind of not where I'm at with it. I like, I don't know, you probably can't see it, but I run relatively low action. I don't have any tools here to measure where it's at, but I've got it pretty much right across the top of the frets, and I'm still able to get
Yeah, cool. It's not fretting out at all.
Yeah. From the 12th fret up, I like to be able to get, at least 2-step bends out of it and still have relatively low, what I call bedroom action,
Right.
bedroom guitar playing action, because when we're live and the adrenaline's up, it's probably a little bit higher just because I'm digging in a little bit harder.
Gotcha.
Want the strings to ring out and all that. And was that what we were even talking about? Where are we at now?
Who knows? I'm just enjoying the chat, so let's carry on. Talking of the guitar, though, you've been, jumbo frets, ebony fretboard, 22 frets as a rule. What makes you go ebony versus, say, maple? Is it a tone thing, a feel thing, or a look thing, or all of them?
I think it's a little bit all of it. In the beginning, I had both. I had maple and ebony.
Right.
Because I was kind of on the fence, because they're both really tight-grained woods. And I think the reason I wanted the maple was going back to that Eddie Van Halen thing.
Right.
I always loved looking at his guitars, and you could just tell he spent so much time playing those guitars. You could just see how the fretboard worn out. You could see where his fingers spent the most time on it. And I was like, God, I want to do a maple one just so I can, have that feeling and have a guitar, a neck that wears in like that, and you can just see how gross it is from years of playing. And,
right.
But I noticed, even with the mahogany bodies, maple was a little bit too bright.
Right.
Even though it has that tight grain and it feels similar to ebony. When we were recording any of the maple fretboarded guitars that I had, we would kind of lean away from because they were just a little bit too poppy, a little bit too bright.
Right.
Really sit in the mix very well. So I started favoring the ebony over it.
Makes
And
sense.
when you've got so many different models out, you can choose a white one with a maple board or a black one with an ebony board. It's it gets a little confusing, and
Right, it
people are,
does.
what do I do? And I'm like, so I talked to Justin, and I was like, maybe we should just simplify, and maybe we should just lose the maple altogether. Which sorry about all you maple lovers out there, but I prefer ebony, and it's my guitar. So
talking, talking of mahogany, like one of the, what all of your signatures have been mahogany and mahogany has a really chunky, like low mid range. Is that part of the reason you choose it for the tone?
yeah, I haven't been able to pull one of my old Charvels that's made out of poplar or ash or even alder, or any of my old Strats with humbuckers in them. They're all way too bright, and they don't have that, like
Chunk.
I said, we're tuned so low. We're not Iron Maiden, so I can't play a straight up Strat with humbuckers in it like Dave Murray would.
Right.
I just wouldn't be able to compete with everything else that's going on. I mean, I believe mixed guitars are mahogany, if I'm not mistaken. And when we were recording, it seemed like all the Gibsons that I was playing were beating all of the Strats that I was trying to play. And I was like, oh, I want a Strat made out of mahogany then. And then, so, Fender was gracious enough. I mean, they never made to my knowledge, other than rosewood guitars like Harrison used to play, they never really messed with mahogany too much. And they made me the prototype in mahogany, and here I am in the studio using all my guitars now, and I don't have to, pick up a Flying V or an Explorer or a weird guitar if I don't want to. I mean, obviously there's different guitars for different occasions and different vibes and different things, but that's not to say that I couldn't grab, a Charvel or something and make it work.
Right.
It just depends on the producer and the sounds they're getting and how much they want to mess with the, all the mic pre's and all that stuff,
Yeah, because the bottom line is, because you guys are tuned so low, even though mahogany has a low mid thing, low mids are really your mids. So
yeah, and it pops, and it sits in a mix really well, and it sounds thorough. It just has a thing.
yeah,
What's that?
so I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you there. The thing that interests me is a lot of people will listen to a band like Slipknot and go, oh, they've got to be scooping the mids, where in fact mids and metal actually mix really well, because you need mids you hear.
I have been pushing my mids lately more so than ever. Ever since I started using the orange amps that I was using, and they're very mid-rangey by nature. They have that very British EL34
Right.
snarl to them, like the old Marshalls, the old 800s, and they're very mid-rangey. The guitar is a mid-range instrument. It needs to sit in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, it has to sit in that tonal range. Otherwise, it's just going to there's going to be frequency masking. It's going to disappear. Like there was a phase in time, like the Korn eras where everybody was doing subwoofers on guitar cabinets. And well, that's why Fieldy's bass sounds clicky, because all the guitars are taking up all the bass frequencies. If Fieldy was to tune his bass and make it sound like a bass, you wouldn't hear it.
Right.
Because, Head and Monkey's guitars are eating up all those frequencies, so on the last record and the previous record, I really spent a lot of time trying to get more of that Marshall-y mid-range bark from
Right.
like L34 into the mix, so that even though we're tuned this low, the guitars can sit in the mix better and not, kind of disappear, because if you add in, Clown's bass drums and the percussion and the regular kit and then bass guitar and then you got Sid scratching and and if he's doing anything that's outside of jungle that has a lot of like maybe dub low end,
Right.
guitar frequencies are just getting lost.
Yeah, so it's essential, yeah, because like as you've correctly pointed out, you're not just fighting bass and drums and another guitar. You've got all sorts of frequency eaters out there in Slipknot.
Yeah, and that's kind of a little bit of a bum out. I'm not lucky enough to be like the only guitar player in a 3 or 4 piece band where I can, like in the early days when I was in different bands and I was the only guitar player, I had more of a signature tone.
Right.
But you kind of have to give up a little bit of that in the situation that I'm in to live in a certain area so that everything's audible, and it's cool. I mean, I'm a team player. I'll work
Obviously,
with
yeah.
that.
Now, I was going to. One thing I noticed about the guitar is versus your old Jazzmaster, which was kind of none more black, like you didn't have any fret markers. This has got binding. It's got block inlays. It's got a beautiful white body and zebra pickups. So it's very classy looking, dare I say, if that's not an oxymoron, Jim Root and classiness. But it looks very classic in a rock sense. Is it a sort of nod to some of your heroes from yesteryear in a subliminal way?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, no matter what it is, whether it's guitars, clothing, sunglasses, cars, motorcycles, to me, the classics are always timeless.
Right.
And you can try to reinvent the guitar, and you can do, super strats, and you can do all these like 8-string fan frets, crazy, and that's cool for dudes that are in that and can wrap their brains around all that. But for me, classics have always been just that, classic. And with this guitar, we went back to, instead of the 70s headstock, it's got an actual Jazzmaster headstock on it.
Which is great.
I wanted the big block inlays, with the white binding. I feel like it just sets the guitar off. The zebra pickups are, I grew up in the 80s essentially, and all that, power metal and speed metal and rock, like, I'd see BC Riches with, those zebra pickups in them. And there was just something cool about the way that looked. And classic, man. I mean, I wanted it to look like, block inlays, Tone Iommi, you know what I mean? Black Sabbath, got all that going on. It's like, and a lot of people, as far, I haven't personally heard a lot of complaints, but once it got out that I was going to be putting block inlays, all of a sudden people were like, oh, finally, it's about time, and I was like, oh, is that a thing? Because for me, it went back to that muscle memory thing. I mean, I had fret markers across the top, and that's when I'm playing live, that's all I need. I'm never like looking at the front of my guitar necessarily, so. And then back to that muscle memory thing here. It's like I know where I'm going to be at on the fretboard when I'm playing. I don't, look at my guitar too much while I'm doing a live show, especially if you play the same set for a month.
Right.
You just get in the habit. So fret markers, to me, it just seemed like, well, that's just one more thing that the company's going to have to do. It's going to take them longer to produce and might drive a cost up. And then we had that conversation when we were designing this guitar, and they're like, no, it's no big deal. It's not going to add anything to the cost of the guitar. It's not going to, do anything, like that. So I wanted to tip the hat to the classics, I love
Sorry, and I love the way you're talking about the markers you use to find your way with your muscle memory. Those glow in the dark, right? That's cool.
Yeah, these are luminol on the top here, which that kind of blew my mind. We were doing pre-production for the tour, and I had the first prototype, and they shut all the lights off on us sometimes, and it's literally pitch black. And when you've just had all these lasers and lights shining in your eye, you played live before, and then all of a sudden they cut all the lights. You're like,
they're blind.
They're this big, and then all of a sudden they go to this, and you can't see anything, and it's like, but I looked down, and the only thing I could see were these luminol fret markers, and I was like, all right, cool, I know where to start the next song now. We were getting ready to play Vermilion or something, and that's kind of it starts, for me, I got to finger it on the 4th fret, so it's kind of in between 3 and 5, and without the fret markers there, and with it being pitch black, I was able to just look right down and go, oh, okay, I'm there.
Very cool. One more question about the guitar, my friend, I promise. The pickups, like you went from like 81s and 60s to passives with ceramic, but with a built-in preamp. What was your thought process and tone process behind that change?
I've always wanted to try to go back to a passive pickup, just because it's one less thing for my tech to think about, a battery, and
right.
I've got so many guitars, and they pretty much all have EMGs in them, and when they sit for a while, the batteries will die after a while, and I don't want to have to pull the strings and pull a pick guard off to change a battery all the time. But plus there's like a certain tonal characteristic of a passive pickup a dynamic,
Right.
more tone. You know what I mean? That I feel like the 81 and 60 that I was using were missing. Going back to that sort of classic sort of thing, you know, they're very high output, they're very compressed, and I don't want to say, you know, I love those pickups. They're still great.
Me too. Yeah.
I still have them in them. And then you get those people that say, oh, an EMG will make any guitar sound good. Well, not true, because I've got over 200 guitars and I bring them to the studio and they all have the same pickups in them and they all sound completely different from one another. You know, it's like, wow, that one, you know, has all these characteristics. And, you know, and when you're working with Greg Fiddleman, you know, we're analyzing the frequencies. We're looking at the frequency bands and we're looking at, you know, where it's hitting in the range. So I was lucky enough too that, like, when I was talking to Tommy at EMG and he was sending me prototypes, I was like, these are cool. They have a lot less gain than what I'm used to, but I'm using such high gain amps. I don't think I need so much gain from the pickup. I think the amp is compensating for all that. You know, let's do a lower output, something that's a little bit more dynamic. Let's start with the 60 and the 81 as a baseline and go from there, and then let's tweak with the preamp. And I really didn't do that many prototypes. I think the fourth prototype we did was what I was like, yeah, this is great. And I ended up recording the entire last album with that last set of prototype pickups. And we were able to look and compare with Fiddleman and being in the studio. You know, my EMG 81s, you know, they sound a certain way and they look a certain way. When you look at the frequency and then you compare it to these Demons, the frequency band on the Demons is way thicker. It's taking up more room. It's filling up more space. You know, even if you can't catch it with the naked ear, it's happening. I mean, it's there. And it's the scientific evidence is there. You know what I mean? So that was a thing that I was kind of like, this is cool. So it was a little bit of a learning curve, but I wanted to go back to sort of like having something that lends to having more of a tone and is a little bit different from just the stock, you know, 8160 combination, which is kind of what Hetfield was using back in the day and all that, and kind of maybe where his pickups evolved from. And I had a set of his pickups and they had so much output and so much gain. And I was like, I wonder if that's because they switched over to like fractals and they're using all those digital amps now and all that.
Right.
You know? So they're having to push that digital with, you know, more gain or whatever.
Interesting. You know? So yours are, one of my questions was, I haven't had a chance to play them yet. I've heard them, but so they're not that hot then, you'd say?
In comparison to the 81 and the 60, I kind of had to get a little bit used to them, you know. You know, going for those artificial harmonics wasn't quite as, they're less forgiving.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's like I got to work for it a little bit.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Now,
which is cool because I need that. I need to woodshed and kind of have that. You know, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with, you know, having to work at it a little bit will kind of help you play a little bit outside of the box and maybe help you come up with things you wouldn't normally come up with, you know.
And what made you choose like their ceramic as opposed to Alnico? Did you go for ceramic because they're a little bit more aggressive?
I don't remember.
That's a good answer.
Because I think we did both, you know, and that was quite a while ago when they sent me the first sort of prototypes. And with the prototypes, they were also sending me, I can't remember what they're called, but like their 77 set or whatever. Their other proactive set that they were sending me,
right.
Like they actually have, that's not a signature model. And I started getting confused with, okay, wait, hold on, what set is this? What pickups are these? Right. What preamp is that? You know what I mean? And then we just got to a point where I was like, okay, pull everything out. Let's start over. And the latest set that they gave me, let's put that in all the guitars and let's just go with that, because that's what I work with Fiddleman on. And I don't think that I was mindful of whether it was Alnico or ceramic.
Right.
It was more of a, like, I like the way that sounds better than that.
What an amazing way of picking something. I like the way it sounds. Never catch on, my friend. Never catch on.
Yeah, no, I don't ever think of that.
Listen, thanks so much for taking the time. If you had to summarize this guitar in 3 sentences, what would you say? Or you can go 4 if you like, because you are Jim Root and you're 6'6".
I don't know. I mean, this is why I play guitar, so I don't have to think about words. I would say that this is a great representation of a worldwide classic that will never go out of style and will always be there for you.
That's perfect. So if when Slipknot's done, you can do marketing, I guess?
Yeah, maybe. You won't come home and find this with the pool guy.
I'll tell you, I was going to ask you this, if you don't mind. Like, I know that you're actually a Sweetwater customer, and a very attractive sales interviewer has actually brought you a guitar to a show, didn't he? Actually, or did he bring 2 guitars?
Yeah, he brought a guitar to me, Delvin. Yeah, I bought 2 of my previous Jazzmaster signature models. One to have a friend of mine, Darren McKeague, paint. He's like big in the motorcycle world. He's a tattoo artist and all that. And then I just wanted another guitar of mine, so I bought 2 of my signature models off of Sweetwater, and Delvin's my guy that I talked to.
Yeah, Delvin Wolf, yeah, the very attractive Delvin Wolf.
Yeah, and he's my dude. And I would say all of my online purchases for musical gear go through Sweetwater. You know, actually, I just ordered a new iLock dongle before we got on the phone. You know, about a couple hours ago. So,
Very
you know,
cool.
so when I need gear, that's where I go.
So even when you're going to buy a guitar that has your signature on it, you come to Sweetwater. What an endorsement!
Well, sometimes I don't want to put Fender out, and sometimes it's like, oh, I see, you know, sometimes Fender's back ordered and I can't get one, you know, so I'll go to Sweetwater and I'll be like, do they have any of my models in stock? And if they do, I'll just buy them, you know. And there's a number of them that I play live that I've just bought from Sweetwater, and you know, I just set them up how I like, put my strings on them, and throw them out on stage.
Well, the fact, once again, going back to the Fender thing, the fact they're back ordered a lot, that's a good sign that you're doing the right thing with your signature.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that'll continue. Got really lucky, and I think, you know, and, you know, being real and having passion about it and really giving a crap, you know, I mean, really kind of caring about what it is you do, and not being selfish about it to the point where it's like, you know, I don't ever want to put out anything out there just for the sake of putting something out there.
Right.
It's something that I believe in and something that I want and something that I would use, then that's important to me, and that makes it real, you know, and I think, you know, people can sense that, and they sense that if you're not just putting something out there, you know, for the sake of making a buck or whatever, then they'll gravitate towards it. You know, that's that passion in art and that sort of maybe suffering in it a little bit, but you know, if you're real and you really believe in it, and that's the first and foremost thing that you're thinking about, and that's all you want, then everything else kind of follows, you know. Great answer.
Well, I'll tell you what, my friend, I'm done. You've answered my how tall you are question earlier on without me even asking it. So,
this thing. Sorry. I get out on it every once in a while.
It's a great sounding guitar, man. So, the one thing, do me a favor, talk to Justin and tell him he has to make a lefty, and I'll be the guy who tests out the prototype.
I know, I've been talking to them about that. I get a lot of people asking about that, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if they have to retool all their manufacturing, and it's almost like manufacturing like a whole nother signature model for me. But plus that would be cool too for me trying to learn guitar left-handed.
There you go. Especially as you are a lefty.
Yeah, maybe I'll use that angle.
Please do so. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time. And as I said before, hopefully the next time our paths cross, the only masks in question will be the ones that you guys wear on stage. And that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Good seeing you, man.
Likewise, my friend. Thank you so much. Take care, brother.
Have a good one, man.